Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, the Secretary of Homeland Security with respect to the Coast Guard, the Secretary of Commission, Commerce, with respect to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administrations, and the Secretary of Health and Human Services with respect to the Public Health Service. The term United States, when used in a geological sense, means the several states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and Guam. Okay, like I said before, you jakes over there in the islands, you'll be affected by this bill too. So just because you're not for say living in the United States, the so-called 50 states, doesn't mean you're not exempt from feeling this. Okay, so you jakes in the West Indies, mainly Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and what's that? Girl, whatever that is. Y'all gonna be when this is implemented, okay, you will be affected by it as well. Okay, you know, since the term uniformed services mean the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Commission Corps of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Commissioning Corps of the Public Health Services. 2. National Service Obligation. Obligation for service. It is the obligation of every citizen of the United States and every other person residing in the United States. So even if you just say you're not a citizen of America, if you in the United States or on these islands, okay, outside of the District of Columbia, which that's DC, but if you in Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and Guam, you gonna be it'll be your obligation service. Okay, it says person residing in the United States who is between the ages 18 to 42 to perform a period of national service as prescribed in this title unless expected under the provision of this title. From forms of national service, the national service obligations under this title shall be performed either as a member of the active or reserve component of the uniformed service or in a civilian capacity that, as determined by the President, promotes the national defense, including national and community service and service related to Homeland Security. Age limits. A person may be inducted under this title only if the person has attained the age 18 and has not attained the age 42. Okay. Alright. Sections 103. Introduction to perform national service. Introduction requirements. The President shall provide for the introduction of persons described in sections 102A to perform their national service obligations. Limitations to introduction for military service. Person described in section 102A may be inducted to perform military service only if a declaration of war is in effect. So, which I did a lesson on the NDA bill when it got passed, and about martial law. One way they can implement martial law is with the declare of war. Okay, all right, and this bill, and which the same type of writing is mentioned in the NDRP, okay, in sections what at 106, okay, which you know the link or whatever. All right, it says if it's a declaration of war, that the President will dictate which type of service would you do. Okay, the President declares a national emergency, which is martial law, which the President determines necessitates the introduction of persons to perform military service and immediately informs Congress of the reasons for declaration and the need to induct persons for military service or members of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and are engaged in a congressional operation pursuant to a congressional authorization for the use of military force, which will be what they would use these military people, all right, these armed men and women as they become the new police force when martial law is implemented. Okay, it says limitations on numbers of persons inducted for military service. When the induction of persons for military service is authorized by subsection B, the president should determine the number of persons described in section 102A whose national service obligation is to be satisfied through military service based on the authorization and strengths of the uniformed services, the feasibility of the uniformed services to recruit sufficient volunteers to achieve such end strength levels, and provide a mechanism for the random selection of persons to be introduced to perform military service. Section 4, Introduction. Random selection for military service. When the introduction of persons for military service is authorized by subsection B, the president shall utilize a mechanism for the random selection of persons to be inducted to perform military service. Civilian service. Persons described in section 102A who do not volunteer to perform military services or are not inducted for military service shall perform their national service obligations in civilian capacity pursuant in section 102B and 2. Voluntary service. A person subjected to induction under this title may voluntarily perform national service in lieu of being inducted or request permissions to be inducted at a time other than the time at which the person is otherwise called for introduction. Okay, 2-year period of national service. General rule expect as otherwise provided in this section, the period of national service performed by a person under this title should be 2 years. General grounds for extension. After the declaration of the president, the period of military service for a member of the uniformed service under this title may be extended with the consent of the member for the purpose of furnishing hospitalization, medical or surgical care for injured or illness incurred in line of duty, or for the purpose of requiring the member to compensate for any time lost and training for any case. Early termination. The period of national service for a person under this title shall be terminated before the end of such period under the following circumstances: the voluntary enlistment and active service of the person, and an active or reserve component of the uniformed service for a period of at least 2 years, in which case the period of basic military training education actually served by the person shall be counted towards the term of enlistment. The mission and service of the person as a conduct or midshipman at the United States Military Academy, the United States Naval Academy, the United States Air Force Academy, the Coast Guard Academy, and the United States Merchant Marine Academy. The enrollment or service of the person in the officer candidate program, if the person has signed an agreement to accept a reserve commission in the appropriate service with an obligation to serve on active duty if such commission is offered upon completion of the program, such other grounds as the president may establish. The application by the president. In general, the president shall prescribe such regulations as are necessary to carry out this title. Matter to be covered by regulations. Such regulations shall include specialization of the following: the types of civilian service that may be performed in order for a person to satisfy the person's national service obligation under this title. Standards for satisfactory performance of civilian service, and of penalties for failure to perform civilian service satisfactorily. The matter in which persons shall be selected for induction under this title includes manner in which those selected will be notified of such selection. All other administrative matters in connection with the introduction of persons under this title and the regulations, examination, and classification of such persons, a means to determine questions or claims with respect to enclosure for or expectation or defraudment from introduction under this title, including questions of consentative objection, standards for compensation and benefits for persons performing a national service obligation under this title through civil service, such other matters as President determines necessary to carry out this title, use of prior act to the extent determined appropriation by the President. The President may use for purpose of this title the procedures provided in the Military Selective Service Act, including procedures for registration, selection, and introduction, examination, and classification of person. Every person subject to introduction under this title before introduction be physically and mentally examined and shall be classified as to fitness to perform national service. That's where that healthcare bill, Obamacare bill, will come in handy with this part of the bill. Different classification standards. The President may apply different classification standards for fitness for military service and fitness for civilian service. Section 107. Deferment and postponements. High school students. A person who is pursuing a standard course of study or a full-time basis in a secondary school or similar institute of learning shall be entitled to have induction under this title postponed until the person obtain a high school diploma, cease to pursue satisfactory such courses of study, or attain the age of 20. Hardship and disability defraudment from national service under the title may be made for extreme hardship or physical or mentally disability. Training capability. The President may postpone or suspend the induction of persons for military service under this title as necessary to limit the number of persons receiving basic military training and education to the maximum number that can be acquiredly trained. Termination. No defraudment or postponement of introduction under this title should continue after the cause of such defraudment or postponement ceases. Okay, qualifications. No person may be inducted for military service under this title unless the person is acceptable to the Secretary concerned for training and meets the same health and physical qualifications applicable under Section 505 of Title 10 United States Code to persons seeking original enlistment in a regular component of armed forces, other military service. No person shall be liable for induction under this title who is serving or has served honorably for the last 6 months in an component of uniformed services or active duty, or is or becoming a candidate or midshipman at the United States